Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. Today we're going to talk about the next episode in the series about Azure Integration Services, where we discuss where we can use each of the different technologies. Today we're going to talk about Event Hub and Event Grid. So we've got two services that at a super high level sound very similar. They both deal with events. They are different in what their intention is and the kinds of solutions that you would build with them. So first up, we've got Event Hub, where the use case is going to be along the lines of ingestion of millions of events from multiple different sources. You're looking to build a stream of those events that you can then process. Event Grid is really about notifications of when something changes to allow me to build solutions that would react to that change and do something. So those are two slightly different use cases there. So in terms of use case for Event Hub, we'd be looking at creating an event stream, and typically it would be some kind of telemetry data that's being streamed to the Event Hub for us to process. With Event Grid, we're really looking at this event reactive programming model. So something happens, some record in your system changes, we get a notification of that change. We send that notification to the people who care about it. They'll go and get details of that record and they'll do something with it. So the event grid is really like a delivery mechanism for those change events. So we start looking at the differences between these two features. So first up with Event Hub, we've got this concept of a stream of data that you can start at a position on the stream. So you can start at message one, the end of the stream, or a point in time, and you would start reading across that stream, picking up all of the messages until you get to the end. And that really is about that. Just imagine a pipeline of messages that you read from start to finish. Event Grid's really about these notifications. So a notification would hit an event grid topic. It would be published to subscribers, and they would then get that notification. So if we note down here, one of the differences in Event Hub to Event Grid. So typically, Event Grid is being used to receive messages via push. Sorry, I've drawn that in the wrong place there. I meant to do that. So typically, Event Grid's been a system that would push the notification. So you would have defined a webhook, an Azure function, and an Event Grid. If you subscribe to that event, it would send it to your service, and then you would deal with that. But recently, Microsoft announced that they're going to provide pull support, so you can have your messages would be on your subscription, and you can go and receive them when you want to. So that's a newish feature. Now, Event Hub only really it doesn't have the concept of push. It's really the stream that you read. So you're going to pull data off that stream at the rate that you want to process it. So there's a big difference there. The pull feature on Event Grid is going to be really good for load level and scenarios. One of the challenges previously was if you're building a sort of cloud native type application where you've got burst scale and dynamic scale and sort of out of the box from your cloud platform, then it was easy to deal with big load bursts with, say you've got a function and a highly scalable Cosmos database or something. But sometimes your event receivers can't handle big load spikes and you need to throttle that load and do some kind of load level. And so hopefully that pull feature would be really good for that. Now, in terms of concepts, one of the key points to note here is the types of topics. So in an event grid, you can have either an event grid domain, which would have many topics in it. So that would usually be a scenario where you're going to be building lots of topics for custom events, and then you can build subscriptions on each of your topic. You can also just have an individual custom topic here, where if you want to just publish events to your own custom topic and people can subscribe to it. You have system topics, this one here, where these are things where Azure as a platform will offer you events about things that are happening. So maybe you've got a record or a file in storage gets updated. It's the most common one. You can have the platform of Azure can publish an event for you to a system topic you can then subscribe to. Event Hub's different. Actually, sorry, I missed one topic on the Event Grid side. So there's also a partner topic where vendors can create topics for their applications that you can subscribe to as well. Um, Event Hub has a namespace concept, which is similar to an Event Grid domain, I guess, where you define a namespace, you'd have multiple event hubs in it potentially, and then each one would have whatever data you want to have on in that stream, and you can kind of process that. Now, in terms of features, a couple of things on the side of the event hub here. So first off, we've got the capture feature. So this is the ability when you've got this ingestion of lots of events onto the event hub. Commonly, you might want to archive those into a storage account, which opens up archive features to get data into something like a data lake for a Synapse scenario. So capture can kind of do that out the box with a little bit of configuration. Event Hub supports Kafka. So if you've built an application with a Kafka API, you can connect that to an event hub and you can ingest data from using the Kafka API. In terms of sending data, so over here we've got this bit here where if you're sending data to an event grid, you're really going to be using either MQTT or HTTP. Whereas with an Event Hub, you're more likely to be using AMQP over here, so that's really the difference in the protocol you would interact with it. For sending messages, that would usually be either MQTT or HTTP as well for your subscribers to those topics. Now, we do have some differences in terms of dead letter and kind of retry support. So over in Event Grid, on your subscription, you can configure a dead letter, which would mean if any messages couldn't be delivered, they would be written to a storage account so they're not lost. You would then have to process the storage account, maybe republish them to your topic or something like that. It's a kind of quite a raw feature. It archives them, but you have to do a lot of work yourself to reprocess. So there's a potential chance you might try to have some kind of database that you would archive stuff to in your receiver if you wanted to troubleshoot or something like that. Really, Event Grid, as long as it can get a successful acknowledgement it's delivered, then it kind of encourages you to handle the errors yourself. Event Hub's different. So with Event Hub, the data would go onto the stream, and then if you see this note here, so it stays on the stream until it reaches the retention period. So Event Grid, if it's delivered, the message goes away, it'll retry a number of times, then it'll dead letter, and then it's kind of gone. The messages on the Event Hub stay up until whatever the retention period you've configured, which means from an error and retry scenario, you can wind back to an earlier point in the stream and reread messages. So let's say you had systems down today, you go back to yesterday and reread the entire stream, which would be quite good. Now, one of the challenges with Event Hub for processing data from it is if, for example, you read messages in batches, so you're efficiently reading them. If you have an error processing one message within that batch from the Event Hub, you've got to kind of deal with that yourself. You don't have the transactional concepts that something like Service Bus would have to be able to say, I've acknowledged this one, but not that one. So there's a bit of work, and there's some differences in how the two, Event Grid and Event Hub, would work from an error handling scenario. So this really is where we see you replay rather than dead letter. They're different. Now, the other thing that sounds similar but is different is schema. So in Event Hub, we've got this schema registry. So you can define schemas for Avro and JSON, where you're defining what a message would look like. That goes onto the Event Hub, so you can create some expectations for the sender and the receiver, which will support deserialization and it'll support validation of messages. That schema is really about your own message body. What does it look like? What format would it be in? Schema for Event Grid's different. So you've got Cloud Events or Event Grid schema, and these are really like an envelope almost. So Cloud Events is based around one of the sort of open standards type groups where they've defined a common schema for what a cloud event could look like. An event grid's really a Microsoft customization of that schema, but they're really focused on the envelope. So within that, there'll be a segment which I think is called the data element, if I remember right, and that would be where you would put your custom message body. So you might define some properties and some common metadata in the schema, and then your body would be kind of in that data elements. The schema for the event grid isn't really about your part of the message, it's about that envelope that helps the routing and publishing and that kind of thing. Now, in terms of overlaps, both systems have this sender-receiver concept. So somebody puts a message on the resource, somebody gets a message from it, whether it be pulled or pushed. There is the concept of fan out as well on both of them. So an event grid can have many subscribers which can all get the message, which will be fan out. On Event Hub, you can do fan out via consumer groups, so you can have the one stream of data with multiple consumer groups, which means you can have multiple receivers that all get a copy of the messages. The kind of key difference, though, is if you go from fan out to pub sub, where you want to sort of route only a subset of the messages, you can easily do that in Event Grid, and there's some quite advanced features for it with content routing and header routing and that kind of thing, but you can't do that with Event Hub. You have to get all the messages. Now, in terms of pricing, Event Hub has two models, so you're either paying per message for the lower SKUs, per hour for the premium SKUs. You've got a similar type of idea on Event Grid where the cheaper SKUs are focused on messaging and the more premium SKUs are focused on throughput and per hour. Now, this diagram, it's pinched from the Service Bus Event Hub video I did, but actually the concept's the same. So if we think on the event grid, it looks a bit like a service bus where we've got this box would be our event grid domain if we had a domain, but either way that we'd end up with a topic that somebody sends a message to. So in this case, let's say we've got a custom application sends an event to a topic. We would then have multiple subscribers would pick that message up, and then let's pretend here this one's a push to a logic app, and you might write a function that would go and pull, or you can push to a function. The concept at a super high level between Event Grid and Service Bus for this topic to subscription to receivers very, very similar, which is why I've reused that diagram. Now, there's a few lower level diagrams we look at in a few slides where you'll see there's subtle differences come into play, but that sort of 100,000 feet high view is very similar. Event Hub, so we've got the senders sending to this message stream, and actually I guess one point we really want to get across over here is you can have multiple senders who can send to a topic. So we've got multiple senders sending data to the stream, and we've just got a series of messages. The consumer group is looking at this stream. It would start at the beginning, and it would work its way across the stream, reading the messages as it goes. And a second consumer group could be reading the same stream, but it might be at a different point, and it's just working its way through those messages as well. That's really, at a very high level, what these two look like. Now, if we think about the sample architecture we've looked at a couple of times, so in the various videos I've tried to use some examples from the real world. So here's a one that we have which involves both Event Grid and Event Hub together. So we've got our, when our plant fills rail cars with product that go out traveling around the country to get delivered to customers, these rail cars have GPS on them that triggers events to an API we expose to our third-party partner. The events come in through a function and we can write them to an event hub. And that event hub can be configured with the capture feature. So this use of an event hub is really good here because we'll get bursts of messages where we might not do anything for a while, then a train moves and these big long trains you get in North America, that might be a couple of miles long. All the rail cars move and you get bursts of messages that hit every time a car stops, starts, so you get half-hourly, quarter-hourly updates from them. You'll get little bursts of messages and then nothing for a little while, then more bursts. So that works really well for an event hub. I guess one thing, this example, we're talking like thousands of messages. We're not talking millions, but Event Hub can scale to ingest millions of messages without too much problems. The capture feature, so this is a really easy way to get data into the data lake from our Event Hub. So it's automatically going to be writing out files just by configuring that feature. And then we can configure it so say we receive these bursts of messages, they write into a capture file, and let's say you configure it so every 10 minutes write the latest data on the stream right into a capture file. And we can have a system event grid topic that triggers from the file getting written to the data lake. And we can have a Synapse pipeline that triggers from that event grid topic. It would go and read the file, and it would load the data through a Spark job into our dedicated data warehouse. So that would keep us up to date with the latest position of all of our rail cars, and we're just kind of using the best of both worlds of those technologies. Now, we might have in Synapse, we might have other jobs that do other stuff with this data as it processes, but we're able to take the big bursts of events coming in, and we're able to trigger the files, trigger the Spark jobs and the Synapse pipelines as files get written. And that means our transport manager over here, he can be looking at Power BI and he can work out when he expects his rail cars to come back to the plant to be refilled with more product based on real-time tracking of them. Now, if we dig a little bit deeper down, so let's take a look at an event hub. So in an event hub, we've got this concept of event producers. So I've referred to them a few times as senders, producers, just different names of the same idea that somebody's going to send a message to an event hub. Now, the protocols here, so the most common one people tend to use if you've come from a Microsoft stack is AMQP. Kafka API has been supported for quite a while now, so that Azure Event Hubs can be used by people who've already built Kafka applications. And then there is support for HTTPS as well here if you happen to want to use that. Now, in the Event Hub, you partition the data, so you can have these partitions allow you to scale, and you can process higher volumes of data by better partitioning of the data, and you can manage your readers a bit. Now, event receivers, so you can either write your own application, you might have a stream analytics job, or you might have maybe the capture process or something like that can be a receiver. In this case, let's imagine we've got our custom application, and I can have receivers that connect to a consumer group, and they can read the different partitions to process the data. So partitioning lets me scale out receivers so I can process data faster as it comes in. So I can have maybe one partition per receiver. That's really, as we dig down a little bit into Event Hub now, Event Grid and Event Hub used together is a good example. So this diagram's from the Microsoft documentation again, so we'll just have a little bit of a chat and talk through this. Now, the idea here is we've got some devices that are using the MQTT protocol to send data to an event grid about what they're doing and what's going on in state changes. So that's easy to expose. MQTT, which would be friendly for these devices, which is great. So from an event grid, we've got all of the data coming in. We can have a subscriber that pushes onto Event Hub. So at the minute, you can't send messages to an Event Hub with MQTT, so Event Grid's a good choice for these devices. But it's easy to get your data onto the Event Hub from the Event Grid. And then a stream analytics job might be one of the receivers. So a common scenario might be if my stream analytics job runs and it creates some kind of aggregate. So you might have like a time window, and you might have a sliding time window that wants to get the latest state in the last 5 minutes of all of your devices. So you could easily put together a job that creates that aggregated view from the event hub, and maybe you just save into a SQL table, a real summary. So if you've got millions of devices, pinging all this data in, that stream analytics job and event hub combination would be a really good way of just getting the current status of as of the last time window, save it to SQL, and then you can Power BI it, and you've got a good way of making that data usable, even though there was like a big storm of data coming in or something. Now, if we think about one of the other event grid scenarios, this is a little bit like the one we had earlier. So this is the storage account where a blob gets created and Azure can be configured to automatically send this event to the event grid. This point we've got subscribers, so we might have a function. The webhook can support either your own custom API, you can support things like logic apps, or you might have an event hub, so you get loads of files coming in and you want to do a stream analytics job off an event hub would be a good example. Or you just want to know about the files getting written in for some kind of change feed or something. So that would be how you could configure these system events from Azure using Event Grid to go to multiple different types of subscribers. So this here is going to be a system topic in this scenario. Now, a custom topic is going to be really for your own application. So this scenario here means you've custom developed a logic app and a function, and your function has an event that happens. So say, I don't know, let's say you've received an order, you might have saved it to your database, you trigger an event to the event grid, so it's going to be an HTTP based event. It hits your event grid. Let's imagine, let's draw our database down here so we can get a nice diagram going. So my logic app saved my order to my orders database. Sorry, my function saved my order to my orders database, sent an event out. One of the subscribers is the logic app that gets the notification of an order getting created. So it comes and reads the order from the database, and then it might go and load it to your, one of your other applications that needs to process an order or something like that. So that could be a good way where you can build a highly scalable website with things like web apps, functions that can work with maybe a SQL database on Azure. You ping your events out, and then logic apps can go and process that data in the background or something. Thank you very much for listening to today's video about Event Hub and Event Grid. I hope these scenarios and discussion around the different features and options are really useful for people to help you understand the scenarios where you might choose Event Grid, where you might choose Event Hub, the times you would combine the two of them together. So that great one was that stream analytics example, or another good one might be using the Event Grid to trigger from a capture file. There's lots of different things you can do here, and hopefully just understanding where these fit is going to help everybody building their Azure Integration Services platforms and build loads of great solutions. Please comment, tell me what kind of things you would like to see in future videos, any questions, and hopefully this is useful. Thank you very much for listening.